Our teeth want to sink into some MLS talk here. In particular, let's start with Toronto FC. They had gone unbeaten in four. Then they score 4 goals on the road, gentlemen, against New York, but they still can't pick up the victory. It's a 5-4 loss. Then their next game is at home. And how do they respond? A 2-1 loss to FC Cincinnati. So let's begin with, I should say, which loss is more concerning to you? Ollie, is it that 5-4 loss to NYCFC or is it the 2-1 loss to FC Cincinnati?
Neither great results, obviously. I think it's the NYCFC game, just because I know that you probably expect CFC at this point to lose that one, but just the manner in which it happens, conceding 5 goals, kind of getting blown apart after obviously getting out in front early on. That one to me was a bit more kind of indicative of the fact that this team defensively is very vulnerable right now and a really strong team in this league can cause them some major issues, and that shows you how far they still have to go to really build a fully functioning team here. The Cincinnati game, didn't think they were great by any means in the firch half, but ultimately they got beat off 2 set pieces, right? They just didn't defend properly. I thought that game they were much more kind of in it and looked like a much more of an equal to that team, as you would expect than they did to New York. So I can see why people would think the Cincinnati result would be more disappointing, but I actually think they were probably better, at least in spells, in the second half in that game than they have been in some games they've won this season. So I'll take the NYCFC game, but this is, for me, what we expected from CFC. Inconsistency. It's going to be good some weeks, not so good other weeks. This is a process here, and you're going to have to give it some time.
That's why neither loss really particularly bothers me all that much. To be honest, you're playing the reigning champions coming off a 6-0 win inside a baseball stadium. You end up losing by 1 goal. I guess it's the home loss to Cincinnati because they're bottom of the table entering the weekend. I do think that they're much improved from the Cincinnati team we saw last year. And a Cincinnati team, by the way, who beat TFC 2 of the 3 times last season as well. But the XG, I mean, for that game, expected goals, TFC 1.8 to 1.4 in the 2-1 loss on the weekend. That will bother them, not only losing to Cincinnati, but losing to them at home. But again, like Ollie said, this is part of the process that this team is undergoing right now, a massive rebuild, and you're going to have ups and downs. And quite frankly, Andy, I'm not sure if TFC have the quality to play any team off the field right now. I think you're going to see a lot of close games, grinded out type games in order for this team to come away with results at this point.
Mhm. I just want to put it out there right now that you might see me ducking here and there. That's because I'm in an office where there are a lot of wires, and we all know I got a new puppy, and she just might be chewing some of them. So I need to keep an eye on her. But let's stick with Toronto FC here, gentlemen, because we're a couple months into the season. And I think we're past the point of too early and small sample size. This is when we really start to see some trends starting to form here. So, Gareth, I'll come back to you because I know you had just mentioned some analytics there, right? Because Toronto FC right now, when it comes to goals for, goals, or I should say expected goals for, expected goals against, they're really at the bottom, right? When it comes to expected goals for, they're at the bottom. When it comes to expected goals against, they're pretty much there with allowing the most. So, why are teams creating so many scoring opportunities against TFC?
Well, expected goals, they're better than a bunch of teams, including Vancouver Whitecaps. So 16 goals for, and it's kind of reflecting the expected goals. The expected goals against, only one side is worse than them in Major League Soccer, and that's San Jose Earthquakes. And the dysfunction with what went on with their manager, what's gone on with, I mean, it's so it kind of shows you kind of defensively where they're at. TFC conceded 19 goals through 9 games. Last year, they conceded goals at an historic rate for them, conceding 66 and 34. Right now, they're on a pace to concede 72. So that's a problem. And whereas early in the season, they were having some difficulties in terms of transition defending. I think they were being super aggressive off the ball, very much like what we saw with LAFC in recent years, right? Like super aggressive off the ball, but you leave yourself exposed at times. On the weekend against FC Cincinnati, too lazy, kind of brain fart, sloppy kind of defensive plays. Salcedo on a set piece, or sorry, leading to a corner kick, just a lazy back pass to Alex Bono. They're punished on a set piece. Then a long throw, Salcedo commits and swing and a miss. Ball drops to Luciano Acosta, who's a top player in this league. Ball ends up in the back of the net. So it's happening in all kinds of ways, Andy. There's a couple of factors at play. One, the entire back line is turned over. only Chris Mavinga remains. That's it from all the players last year. And he's proven to be unreliable, can't stay in the starting 11. Again, has to come out on the weekend through injury. And the fact that maybe some of the personnel just aren't good enough right now. I think that's clearly an area that they need to address, at least bring in one or two players to bolster not only the fullbacks, but the center back positions. That's the first thing. I think bottom line, it comes down to personnel. Are the defenders in this team good enough to deal with some real threats? And TFC have had a very difficult schedule to start the year. Are they good enough right now? And I would say no. I think they need to recruit more and improve in those areas.
I'm not sure I'd put it down to personnel, or not entirely, at least anyway, because I just think with TFC, like how long and how many seasons in their history has defending been a problem? Has their play without the ball been a problem? Right? Like at the very least, even when it's been at its best in like that 2017 season under Greg Vanney, obviously, even then it was a challenge for him, because there's always players in this team, and this is what TFC are. They like to sign stars, and they like to, make sure that they sell them as true superstars. There's always players in this team that did not want to do anything defensively. So even in that great 2017 team, Greg Vanney had to work around Sebastian Giovinco and Josie Altidore from a defensive point of view, because he knew he couldn't really expect them to contribute a whole lot on that side of the ball. And so there's always that tension there. I think we're now talking about Salcedo maybe not playing very well. Again, how many seasons have we been talking about a centre back underperforming? Like, is there a point where you have to say, like, we're the problem here rather than the defenders, because of the way the team is constructed, and because of the way that TFC like to build again around these stars who maybe don't give you what you need on that side of the ball? So we've talked about it before. Like, that's going to be a real kind of fundamental tension, I think, with what Bob Bradley is trying to build and what he has at his disposal. Is that he already has Pozuelo, who is essentially a zero when TFC don't have the ball. And they're going to bring in Lorenzo Insigne as well, who again is being billed as this big superstar. You're not going to really get a whole lot of that out of him when TFC turn the ball over, in terms of pressing, in terms of getting back into shape, and all of those different things. So it makes it very, very difficult, I think, for the players behind that front group to survive, right? They're trying to hang on, essentially. And that's something that, I think you can't detach that from the fact that this TFC team likes to go out and make big splashes and make big stars out of their best players. And with that, maybe comes a little bit of a lack of work ethic that you wouldn't see elsewhere.
But this team's not that, Ollie. These are two completely separate coaches. In 2017, TFC were a great defensive team. Only gave up 37 goals in 34 games. That's excellent. They found players who are willing to dig in and commit and be able to play whatever formation that they wanted to play, whether it was 3 at the back or 4 at the back. Like, I think it comes down to personnel. Right now, TFC are playing with 2 wingbacks who are brand new to Major League Soccer. They're playing with Salcedo, who's been hit or miss, a player that they're spending a lot of money on, who's expected to keep that back line together, has been suspended for 2 games, and alongside Shane O'Neill, which was a player that wasn't deemed good enough to keep in Seattle. I think he's been fine. I think actually Shane O'Neill played really well in the weekend, but this is where we're at right now. The personnel, that's what it comes down to. It's not good enough at the back, and Chris Mavinga just can't be relied upon right now. You need better defenders. When things turned around for TFC, they had Moore, they had Beitashour, like they had Moro, they had all these players who were tried, tested, and true, and were willing to do the blue collar work. Sometimes it's not about the system, it's about the players and whether they're good enough or willing to commit enough to get the job done. And I think at this point, it's a little bit too much of an ask for some of these players in the TFC
Well,
team.
Gareth, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there a little bit. Like, I think offense is something that instinctively comes naturally to a lot of players. And we're seeing that a lot with TFC, everyone wanting to push up the field. Playing defensively takes an effort. That's more of a skill set that you have to be willing to commit to. And we know Pozuelo can score goals, but if we're watching TFC games, he's not exactly committed defensively to the ball. And
That's my
sometimes
point.
he flies around the pitch and
Yeah.
it just messes up a system. Salcedo, we discussed him last week. He wants to push up the field sometimes, and he did that against FC Cincinnati because they needed the goal. That's fine. But who are you communicating with who's covering you? Because now Alex Bono is forced into a grade A save, where FC Cincinnati has a breakaway. So I just feel like, there needs to be some communication there, because offense, we all want to run up the pitch and score a goal. who's committed to playing defensively? Do you have the
Well,
personnel
I
who
the,
wants to
the
do that?
comment the comment was made to me by Greg Vanny years ago, just how important Marky Delgado was to this team. And he's a player that I was talking to some fans after
Ollie
the
loves
game, and
them.
some people were saying like Marky Delgado, well, don't miss him. Well, be careful what you ask for, because Delgado did a lot of the running that some of those other attacking players wouldn't do and kept the team together. Like, you're gonna need it's not just players at the back, it's players across the field. Look, the system that they're playing right now is probably not the ideal way that Bob Bradley would want to play with with three center halves. But it's put Pozuelo in a position where, from an attacking perspective, it plays to his strengths and there's more cover in behind. But then, even if you look at personnel in the midfield, maybe TFC are a player short in terms of their center midfield options. If Prizo's not fully healthy, if Akello's not fully healthy and can't play that role, perhaps you need to go out and get another, holding midfielder to play alongside Michael Bradley at times. Bottom line is, I think that this TFC team is still 4 or 5 or maybe even 6 players away from being where they want to be. You cannot do it all in one transfer window. You
Of
cannot.
course.
So this is a process. This is my expectation of what this team's going to be all about.
Yeah, you can't do it all in one window, but I think you mentioned it there, where it was like Bob Bradley has a way he wants to play, right? And he's going to stick to that. And I think he should be backed and given time to build that. Greg Vanny didn't do that. Like, he was very, very flexible and very pragmatic, depending on the players he had at his disposal. And even that 2017 team, great defensive team, you're right. They didn't defend high up the pitch because they couldn't. They did not try to do that because it wasn't possible for them with
Yep.
the players they had at their disposal. Whereas Bob Bradley, he is going to try and do that. That's what he wants to do. He wants to modernize the style of play this team plays. That's why I don't think you can just put it down to personnel, because it becomes a cultural thing of what you're asking your attacking players to do. And Bob Bradley wants to ask more of them. I think it's going to be a real challenge for him to get what he wants out of that attacking group defensively.
So let's put a little bit of a bow on this conversation because, I mean, Gareth, I feel like you've also answered, you can't get it all done in one window. Let's see what Lorenzo Insigne can bring. Curious to see other moves that Toronto FC is going to make. But new coach, transition with players, right? You just said it. Delgado's gone. Josie Altidore is gone. There's been, Gonzalez is gone, who was in that back line too. Richie Larea. I can go down the list, right? Bottom line, this is a different team. So, Gareth, I'll start with you. Is this a transition year for Toronto FC? I mean, are they underperforming, or are they where you expected them to be given the turnover?
They're actually ahead of where I expected them to be honest with you. Like, they're a team that's picked up enough points that, if you look at it right now, and we're 9 games into the season, are right around just about where a team will be that will be committing for a playoff spot. This team lost 14 players last year who played 400 minutes or more for this team. They've had 7 players who are brand new to Major League Soccer, are playing substantial roles. And by the way, they've hit an absolute home run with Jesus Jimenez. No player in Toronto FC history scored more goals in his first 9 games than him. Like, Seba scored 22 in 2015. Like, he was unbelievable. He had 4 goals in his first 9 games. Better than Altidore, better than Dero. This guy has just been an absolute home run. This is where the difficult part is, Andy, and you said it. When Insigne comes in, it's going to change the expectation. This team's going to be expected to compete on a regular basis. Is this group, and will this group be ready to take that step forward come the summertime? I think that they need to bring in at least a couple other players with them in order for that to be the case. And there's a little bit of a separation, I think, between the reality of what this group goes in and the casual fans who turn up at BMO Field, even some of the hardcore fans that expect that this team's, should have hit the ground running this year and success would have come like that. It's not like that. It's not easy. And perhaps the Insigne signing has maybe set up that expectation to be a little bit higher from where it actually should be. And that's what can cause problems more so than anything else with the process playing out on the field.
I don't really want to let them off the hook this year, because I think when you're spending, $15 million a year on one player, and you've got Pozuelo and Jimenez and Bradley and Azorio, like, there's enough quality in this team that they should be a playoff team and should be competitive. Ultimately, though, I think they'll be judged on next year much more than this one. I think they can make the playoffs this year, and if they do, that would be great and give them some playoff experience, obviously, going into next season. Or they could miss out probably quite narrowly the way they're going right now. does it really make that much of a difference? In the long run, I'm not sure it will. I'm sure there'll be lots of criticism if they miss the playoffs this year at the time, and a lot of pointing at Insigne. But if they come back in 2023 and look like a real contender and compete for MLS Cup, no one's going to care what happens this season, right? People will then be quite happy to just see it as a transition year. So, like I say, it's tough to really say that about a team that is spending that much money that they shouldn't be competitive. But ultimately, I think Bob Bradley has the backing of the club, and they'll stick with
Yeah.
him through this process, and he will be more judged on what he does with a full season next year with Insigne.
Mhm.
Some of that money needs to be shuffled around still, Ollie. And
Yeah,
unlike some
yeah.
other teams, even in this country, it's not just about making the playoffs, it's about competing for trophies on a regular
Yes, yeah.
basis. The bar is different.